This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to Roots and All. This episode is brought to you by Horticouture, a conference exploring the influence of plants and gardens on the fashion world and featuring some of the industry's leading academics and influencers. For more information, visit the LCGD website, lcgd.org.uk, or their Eventbrite page. The conference will take place on the 9th of October, and tickets start at just £59, and the day will be streamed online as well as in person at Kew Gardens. This week I'm speaking to social media sensation and veg grower Gerald Stratford about growing big veg. Do they taste better? How do you avoid pests and diseases? What growing media is best? And what can you do with your big veg once you've grown it? Gerald's new book, Big Veg, has recently been published, and his star continues to ascend. Gerald spoke to me from his shed, with his wonderful wife Liz and cat Jet in attendance. He starts with the tale of his social media overnight success.
Me and my good lady moved to this little bungalow in the Cotswolds 5 years ago, just under 5 years ago. And I was an avid fisherman for all my life. And gardening was just something you done because you had a garden. You know, I treat gardening like you would tidy in your bedroom or your kitchen. You know, it's just a part of your house. So I've always grown vegetables. But I decided I was going to cut back on the fishing because, you know, we're both over 70 and got a lovely big back garden. And I thought, I'm going to cut down on the fishing and go into gardening. And then in February of 2019, a friend of mine up country, I was talking on the phone, and he said, have you thought of social media? You know, Twitter, etc. And I said, no, I haven't. I know what it is, but I haven't really gone into it. And I investigated and thought, yeah, it's a good idea. I'll just go into Twitter solely for my garden. And that's what I've done. And over the next few months, I gained a few followers and etc. And I followed a few people. And I think by May of 2020, I'd got something like 96 followers, and I'd followed about the same. All garden related. And I had a bucket of potatoes in the greenhouse ready to harvest. May the 16th, I think, the date. And I gave Liz my iPhone and let's go and harvest these and you take a couple shots. And that's what we done. And I put them on Twitter. And then my captions was my first early rocket. Well, please. Rocket was the variety of potatoes, by the way. And the phone started buzzing and tweeting, and I thought, what's going on? You know, I didn't really know. And so I phoned my nephew up after about a couple of hours, and he come back to me a while later and said, you've gone viral with your spuds. And I knew what viral was, but not in the text of social media. And so I asked him, and he said, well, people all over the world have just liked your little photograph. And over the next 48 hours, my following went up to 9,000, and I'd had something like just under 80,000 likes. And, you know, it hit me like a brick. And ever since then, it's just escalated.
And how many followers do you have now?
308.7, I think.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That is impressive.
And 54.8k on Instagram. And there's various other things, you know, which, to be honest, I don't even know. But people keep telling me I'm on this and I'm on that.
And of course, you've modelled for Gucci recently.
Yes, that all happened late winter, early spring. Liz and I sit down since all this popularity has sort of kicked in, and generally after dinner we sit down and just go through all the messages, etc., etc. And there was one from a company representing Gucci. The company was called Highsnobiety, and I showed Liz, and I said, I think somebody's having a laugh. But Liz being Liz said, you just message back and be polite. And so I did. And this lady from Berlin spoke to me and arranged a Zoom meeting, followed by another Zoom meeting. And then there was a Zoom meeting with people from all over the world, sort of interrogating me. And I just sort of took it on board, thinking, well, this must be the way the world ticks now. And a while later, I was whisked off in a limousine one Thursday night to a private address because everything was locked down then. And I was assured that everything was above board and COVID-19 the rules haven't been broken. And what had happened, they'd got this hotel, which was shut, opened it up solely for all the staff, including me and the models, to stay for 2 nights. And the following day, I was whisked off to a private farm in Hertfordshire, and I was treated like royalty. I'd never experienced anything like a film star or an actor. I'm a gardener, a fisherman. And it was so good. I had my own dressing gown, hot water bottles and things like that because it was freezing, my own dressing room. And it was a bit strange the first morning. But by the end of the 2 days, we were all one family. And the models were, I look at modelling in a totally different vein now because it was so cold, snowing, rain, all sorts of horrible weather, and they just took it all on the chin. And there was one Chinese model, a young girl from New Zealand, a young man from Canada, and one from England. And, we got on like house on fire.
Fantastic. Love it. And all because of a bucket of rocket spuds. Amazing.
I have found out that Gucci sort of liked what I was doing with my recycling ethics. And they are heavy into making stuff with recycled material. They make a lot of their bags, etc., out of old fishing nets which have been recovered from the seabed. And they just liked what I was doing. And
there you were, in a hotel with the models. Brilliant. It's amazing. So, and also out of this, you've got a book deal. And I was lucky enough to get a copy of your book, which, as I said before we started recording, I did learn an awful lot from. And it's called Big Veg. And I wondered, why would you want to grow big veg? Is it always best for taste?
A big vegetable tastes just the same as a small vegetable, because if you're growing something big, you put the little bit of effort in, and it's growing just as quick as something small. Something will only be sort of tasteless and tough and horrible, which some people think big veg are like that, if it takes a long time. Most of my big veg is grown just as quick as somebody growing something small.
Interesting. Yeah. And you grow yours to show. Is that right as well?
I do both. since COVID, sowing has struggled. And I was lucky enough to enter 3 items last year in a national show, which was sponsored by a compost and medium company called Canna. And I was lucky to get second in show with my set of 3 carrots. I was, because I'd never done nationals before. Been so successful local, but never national. And that blew me away.
Well, judging by the pictures in the book, I'm not remotely surprised. You grow some amazing stuff. You do mention in the book that you have quite sandy soil. Does that help when you're trying to grow big veg?
Things like carrots and parsnips, etc., I grow in barrels, which is a little bit different than growing in the soil in your garden. And it is explained in the book. You get a barrel, I fill it with builder's sand, give it a good watering, and then you could use a crowbar. I use a piece of guttering down pipe, the same length as the barrel I'm using, and you push it down into the sand. It only takes 2 attempts, and you pull it up, and the suction from pushing down holds the sand inside, and you end up with a hole in the sand. Mm-hmm. And then you fill that up with compost, and then you plant 3 seeds on the top, and they grow, and then you have to be cruel because you have to get rid of 2 and leave 1. And with a little pair of sharp scissors, I just snip off the 2 which I think are not so good as the one I'm leaving. I used to pull the ones which I didn't want in the barrel up and plant in the garden because I'm a big softy like that. But I did find that you could disturb the root of the one you're leaving in when you pull them up, and that doesn't do the carrot any good.
Yeah, there's such an art to it. I really did learn a lot, as I say, from the book, and I am full of admiration because there's such a lot of effort that goes into it.
It's not complicated. It's basically, I'm a hands-on. If you were with me now, I could show you and you would remember forever. And sometimes a book or something can't do that. And I try my hardest to make it sound as simple as I can.
Yeah, you do. You do a really good job of explaining it, actually, and it doesn't intimidate me, and I'm not the best veg grower in the world, and I read the book and I was very inspired.
I want you to become a gardener and enjoy your garden.
Yeah, and you definitely do that. And one of the interesting things I thought, looking at particularly your big onions that you grow, and in view of the fact that you do show them sometimes, how do you avoid rust on the leaves? I just cannot avoid that myself when I grow them.
Most sort of illnesses within the vegetable family are stress related. And if you can sort of grow something and keep it well nourished, well fertilized, well watered, you're more to create a healthy plant. You're more inclined then to not have illnesses like rust, because rust is something which you get on anything with a thin root, a thin leaf, like onions, leeks, etc. If you're unlucky to get something, pull it up straight away and dispose of it, because rust it's created through the wind blowing spores through the air.
And you wouldn't compost that, is that right?
No.
Okay.
There is an argument at the moment regards some things, You know, when the plant dies, it dies with it. But I'm one of the old ones who says, don't put it in the compost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I suppose, does the same thing go for blight on tomatoes and potatoes?
Yes. I was talking with a reporter from the Sunday Times last week. They phoned me up and wanted my views on blight. And I think not always, but most of the time that is an immune thing. If you have your tomato, blight seems to hit things quite late in the summer, sort of July into August and September. It's very rarely you get blight in May and June. It's after the 22nd of June when the days are getting shorter and the weather is changing. And and your plant is getting older, and you're taking all the tomatoes off, and it needs more fertilizer to keep it going. And if you are sort of say if you were busy one day and couldn't water them, that's all it takes to change that tomato.
Yeah, so you've got to be consistent with your care. That I was going to ask you that actually. How many hours a day do you spend tending to your veg? And obviously now you're getting a bit more of a jet set lifestyle. Have you got someone that can look after your plants if you're not there, that you trust?
No disrespect to Liz or anybody, but nobody can look after my plants like I do. And I they're my children, and you look after your children, don't you? And I look after my plants the same, you know. And I'm lucky to have a partner in Elizabeth that we're not holiday people, and you know, we don't want to go here, there, and everywhere. We just love our gardens and our allotment, and that's all the love we need, isn't it, Liz?
Yeah. Oh, and are you there every day then, both of you?
Occasionally, you know, our one big day this year, and I've decided it's going to be a big thank you to myself and Elizabeth, is Chelsea. And we're no driving. I'm going to get a taxi to the train station, train to London, and the same home. Have something nice to eat. That's our one day in the last 2 years.
Well, it's a good time of the year this year, so hopefully most of the stuff in the garden will be, it won't be full on middle of the growing season, so that could be handy as well.
Yes, it's sort of the season's gradually grinding down now. You know, the potatoes are being harvested, your tomatoes are almost finished, and my peppers and chilies have started to ripen well. The cucumbers are almost finished. I just harvested my two big marrows. I grow some large marrows. The two I had at the allotment stopped growing. I measure them every day, length and girth, and when they stop growing, that's time to get them out. And I brought them home yesterday with the help of a friend. They were too heavy for me.
Wow. How long are they?
Let me get my diary. I can give you the exact message, the length. One of them will be on television next week. One of them is 33.6 kilograms. And my biggest one is 43.4 kilograms, which is approximately 95.8 pounds. It's approximately 41 inches long. I'm sorry, I'm not metric. And 47 inches round the circumference.
Wow, that's huge.
PB for me. And
Is it? Amazing.
You know, if I just get one an inch longer or an ounce heavier, I'm happy.
And do you think it's been a short summer, or do you think we're getting a bit of an early autumn this year?
It's been a strange year, to be honest. We had very warm weather right at the beginning, which didn't do any good. And then we had quite a wet end of May, June. And now, overnight, it seems we've gone into autumn. I mean, the weather for the last, 5 days is just cloudy and still.
Yeah, and dry. It's so dry at the moment. Yeah. Where I am, we had really quite low overnight temperatures, even into July. We were still getting 9 degrees in the polytunnel.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's really dropping overnight. And I don't think, as you say, it's been a strange year and not been the best year for growing, I don't think. So, no. Anyway, you've still managed to grow a bigger courgette than ever, marrow than ever. So that's impressive given the weather. The other thing I was going to ask you about in your book that you mention is that you dig a trench for your runner beans. And I just thought, well, it sounds like a really good idea. Can you just explain how that works?
Incredible way of getting rid of your household waste, vegetable waste. And that is just after Christmas. I try to do it before Christmas. I dig a trench, 2 foot wide and about 18 inches deep. And it's the length of my runner beans. Sorry. You know, if you plant 10 runner beans, you will have a trench long enough for 10, etc. And then I will empty one of my compost bins of ready-to-use compost and put on the bottom. And then over the next, say, 4, 5, 6 months, I will add kitchen waste. You know, your potato peelings, your cabbage, your onion stalks, all the stuff you're using in the kitchen, but never protein, because that will encourage rats. And if you have any newspapers, rip them to shreds, lay them in the trench with the vegetables and just damp it down with a watering can. And just by the time May's here, that trench is full up, and then you just backfill with the soil at the side of your trench with what you dug out, tread on it to firm it down, put your canes or your sticks or whatever you've got for your beans to climb up. And because beans are a very hungry plant, they like lots of nourishment and lots of water, and you will have magic runner beans. What I use, not because they're world, I don't know how it got the name, but they're called Guinness World Record. So I think at some time or other they may have done a world record. And they are a big bean. I've had them up to 27 inches long. But they are a very nice eating bean. And they're really prolific.
Does that work with any other veg, or is it just runner beans really that benefit?
With runner beans, and I also do a climbing French bean. The same practice. You could do it with peas, you know, but you have to be careful with some veg because you could have too much nitrogen, which will give you lots of leaf and no fruit. You have to balance it out.
Okay, interesting.
A little tip. When they're all well flowered, in the evening, just before it gets dark, spray it with plain water. I use a trigger gun. I spray all the blossoms. It helps the pollination because sometimes the bees struggle to do it all. You spray it, you know, 1 litre trigger gun with plain, clean water, room temperature, not straight from the tap, you know.
That's a good tip. Yeah, brilliant. So obviously, apart from harvesting your marrows, what else are you doing on your plot right now? If anyone is also growing veg, what should they be doing at this time?
Possibly this afternoon, I will take off the tops of my main crop potatoes up the allotment. You know, the growing branches are called potato alm, HAULM, I think. It's called haulm, but it's the green stuff what's growing out the ground. You cut that off and leave the potato in the ground for about 10 to 14 days, because when you cut the branches off, that tells the potato to stop growing and the skin gets nice and firm, you know, for storing. And then in 2 weeks' time, I'll be digging them up. Every, say, third or fourth day, I check all my brassicas to make sure there's no pests and diseases on them. And check, basically, you know, I'm checking the garden all the time. Wherever I walk, I'll either pull a weed up or check something out. My father used to say, never walk past a weed.
Is that your allotment cat in the background, or your garden cat?
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, Jet.
He's looking at the manor. He'll come in, he'll look at us and say, I want something to eat now. It doesn't demand.
That's cats for you.
Yes, it is. The opposite, aren't they? They bet.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Please feed me.
Yeah, we're all the slaves to cats, I'm afraid. So, well, I think that's the end of my questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before I let you go? Because I expect you're busy. You sound like you've got your hands full.
I'll never stop talking gardening. I will talk a lot.
Good.
You know, my allotment, there is a footpath that goes past it. And people always want to talk, to ask a question. And I'll never refuse. I'll never be a grumpy old man, you know, because what is the point? You know, if somebody wants to talk about an onion or a potato or a flower, they're showing keenness. And it's up to us so-called experts to nurture that keenness and get them to do it. And, you know I give loads of veg away. You know, I'll tell you a little thing I do, which I'm quite proud of, is since I've been here and I've got an allotment, there's a couple live in a bungalow opposite the allotment. They've got an allotment next to me, and they put a table out in the summer months, and they put vegetables out, and people can help themselves and make a donation, and it goes to a charity called the Lawrence Home Nursing Trust. And we do quite well over that. You know, I'm always filling the table up, you know, to help. It was a local doctor who passed away, and his children set up a charity to help people with terminal illness if they want to sort of die at home. And I think it's good, and I'm always, if the table looks a bit bare, I'll fill it up, because it's good cause. I think it's a good cause. And last year I decided we would have a pumpkin day. We had a pumpkin weekend, and that really took off.
That's a genius idea, and it's a really nice way to raise money. And also, you're sharing your produce and people are getting to eat lovely food. So it's kind of win-win.
Yes, I mean, it's got to the point now where, like on a Saturday morning, people will queue up, you know, and see what's on the table before they go to the shop.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Oh, I don't really know. You know, I'm just happy to just let the journey carry on. As long as I got breath in my body, I just want to do things to make people happy.
Thank you for talking to me, Gerald. His is a lovely story all round, and I hope he continues to achieve personal bests on the veg growing and all other fronts. Thanks to you for listening, and to those of you who submitted reviews this week. You are brilliant, and I appreciate your support. If you haven't already done so, please do rate and review the podcast and keep me in the podcast charts, because currently I'm about the only independent podcast there, and I think independent media is hugely important, especially today. I very occasionally hear people moaning about the subject of this week's bug of the week, and honestly I'm astounded. Why wouldn't you embrace these little armour-plated detritus eaters? They don't even look scary. Dr. Ian Bedford agrees.
Sometimes mistakenly called insects, woodlice are actually terrestrial crustaceans and are therefore related to lobsters, crabs and shrimps. There's over 30 different species of woodlice in the UK that we often refer to as pillbugs, sowbugs or slaters, and they're all easily recognisable by their shiny grey plated shells and 7 pairs of legs. The females will also have a pouch on their undersides, within which they carry and protect their eggs and young. When disturbed, some woodlice species roll themselves into a ball, like miniature armadillos, whilst others will just remain motionless. Woodlice are very common within our gardens, where they remain active for up to 3 years, feeding on dead and decaying plant material. Ecologically, they're an extremely important part of nature's food webs and an essential component of the nutrient recycling process. Despite the availability of products for killing woodlice, they rarely eat living plant material, so gardeners shouldn't have to consider them as plant pests. In fact, when they are found within the structure of a living plant, they're usually just sheltering or feeding on bits of decaying or dead leaf and stem tissue. However, large colonies of woodlice can often be found under logs and pots, where they might be considered a nuisance. So if they have to be removed, it's probably best just to sweep them up with an old dustpan and brush, then relocate them under a hedge, or better still, on the compost heap.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.